4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City. A fusion of politics, commentary, entertainment, and sports. Steve and his team bring you the latest news and opinion now. Here is Steve Malzberg.
All right, folks, breaking news, of course, out of the Middle East. Not only did the Israeli cabinet unanimously vote to reject a proposed ceasefire, a humanitarian week-long ceasefire put together in part by John Kerry, but a revelation has emerged, has been revealed, according to several reports out of Israel, that according to captured Hamas terrorists, Israel has found out that Hamas had planned to send thousands of terrorists through the tunnels into Israel on Rosh Hashanah, which begins on September 24th, I do believe, kidnap as many Israelis as possible and then bring them back into the Gaza Strip through the tunnels. Benjamin Netanyahu presented this information to his cabinet reportedly yesterday. Again, you know, not so bad. What do you expect from an oppressed people, right? Hey, you know, you would do the same thing. This is who Hamas is. This is what they do. This is what they plan. And this is why they need to be annihilated. And this is why it's a good thing, in my view, that the Israeli cabinet unanimously said no. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? All right. Folks, let's get to Commissioner Lee Goodman. And, of course, he is the chair of the FEC, and he was appointed by President Obama. And Commissioner, Paul Ryan's writing a book. What are they trying to do to that book?
Well, Steve, for a long time, the Federal Election Commission has been deeply involved in regulating speech that affects politics. And there has been a robust debate over the decades, and if you read the newspapers daily, you can see that the debate is as intense today as it has ever been over how much regulation of speech we need in our democracy to maintain the integrity of our democracy. However, even when the Congress wrote the first Federal Election Campaign Act in the 1970s, they realized that the press is essential to our healthy democracy. And so, as a manifestation of the Free Press Clause of the First Amendment of the Constitution, Congress included in the Federal Election Campaign Act an explicit exemption for the press. Now, over the years, there have been debates within the Commission over how broad that exemption is and who precisely qualifies for the exemption. And when Paul Ryan brought a advisory opinion request before our commission earlier this week, I took issue with my commission because there were not 4 votes. We are a commission of 6 votes, and it takes 4 votes to approve an opinion of the commission. We only had 3 votes to recognize a publisher, a well-established publisher of Paul Ryan's book, as the press entitled to the free press protections of the First Amendment. And this has not been the first time that some pro-regulatory commissioners have taken the view that the press exemption is quite constricted and narrow. So I've been speaking out about freedom of the press and freedom of the press to be free of regulation by the Federal Election Commission.
Where are we headed with this, though? I mean, with regard to Paul Ryan's book in particular, and with regard to what you describe as freedom of the press in general, where are we headed?
Well, the commission was able to send Paul Ryan on his way with a narrower exemption to allow him and his publisher to market his book. But there are limits on the exemption that we could muster a majority vote of the commission for. And to me, that's quite ominous, because although Paul Ryan's issue was resolved on a narrower legal read, publishers now live under a general cloud of regulation. The degree to which they may be regulated by the government is uncertain. And this doesn't just affect book publishers. This was a case about a book publisher. But it also infects the First Amendment freedoms of television stations. For example, several months ago, the commission had before it a Boston television station, WCVB of Boston, that features a regular Sunday morning news program, much like you see on national television, Meet the Press. And WCVB had invited into its studio 2 candidates for a joint appearance, and they called the joint appearance a debate. A third-party candidate complained that by inviting only 2 candidates, WCVB had made unlawful corporate contributions to the 2 candidates that appeared. That is, the value of the time on air and all those production costs would have constituted illegal contributions.
Huh.
At that time, I said the TV station was exempt from our regulation and we shouldn't touch the case. Unfortunately, some commissioners thought we had regulatory jurisdiction, and they sat and adjudged the editorial criteria that WCVB's newsroom exercised in choosing those 2 candidates. This would apply, Steve, to your radio show too. So the failure of a majority of the commission to recognize a broad and clear exemption for the press is quite ominous.
Yeah, and let me ask you, why do you believe this is happening? Is this politically motivated? Getting back to the Ryan book, are we looking at Republican books that are coming under scrutiny? Is that what's motivating this, do you believe, with the other members of the FEC?
Steve, I'm not making a partisan case here today. George Soros had a book several years ago. And do you know that there were votes on this commission to punish George Soros for marketing his book through a direct mail and email list and using that list to market his book? Steve Forbes, on the right, when he was running for president, published a column in Forbes magazine, and there were votes on this commission to find that Steve Forbes had violated the law by writing a column in Forbes magazine. And so the broader point that I'm making is that the government shouldn't be in the business of picking and choosing, and that there is always an inherent concern that when the government does have regulatory power over the media, there's always the ongoing threat of selective enforcement or picking and choosing those that you like versus those that you don't like. And I'm not making a direct accusation about any other commissioner here. I'm raising a broader issue and trying to raise consciousness within the commission and in the public that this commission must protect the free press rights of publishers of books, magazines, TV stations, and radio shows.
And you believe that at this point that those rights are under threat, attack? How would you describe it?
What is happening is, in the current debate over speech in America, and if you're following the news, you see there's a lot of debate out of Washington right now over some people even want to amend the First Amendment to restrict the free speech rights under the First Amendment. And what I'm saying is that the press should be very concerned about those efforts as well, because just because they go after some wealthy person who can spend today or some political party for its spending tomorrow, those same regulatory impulses can reach deep into the press.
Yeah.
And we need to respect the Free Press Clause of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution in all of those debates.
Let me ask you one more, sir, about April Sands, who worked for the FEC, former co-worker of Lois Lerner, and had to resign from the commission in April after she admitted violating the Hatch Act. and there was, she's had emails go missing too. And do you see a connection here? Do you think that there's any, collusion between the FEC and the IRS when it comes to this issue of Lois Lerner's emails and April Sands?
Well, first, as chairman of this commission, let me be circumspect in not mentioning any individual employee's name or confirming the name of any individual employee. However, it is public information that this agency did have an employee who violated the Hatch Act. That's a matter of public record. And we have received from Congress requests for information about that employee and about any emails that that employee may have had within this agency. And we are working closely with Congress to provide them the information that they deserve and that the public needs.
Okay, one more question without mentioning any names. Do you believe there was any combined effort or collusion between the FEC and the IRS in targeting conservative groups?
Here's the point I would make about that. The Congress, in its wisdom, set up the Federal Election Commission as a bipartisan commission constituted of 3 Republican commissioners and 3 Democratic commissioners to guard against partisan enforcement of the Federal Election Campaign Act and election laws. I think that the IRS may need a dose of bipartisanship in its governance so that partisan enforcement of the law or ideological enforcement of the law can't reign in such an agency that has such great control over First Amendment freedoms because of the number of nonprofit organizations that it regulates.
Very interesting. Okay, Commissioner Lee Goodman, Republican chairman of the FEC. Thank you very much, sir. Great talking to you.
Steve, thank you.
My pleasure. All right, folks, very, very interesting. We're going to come back. We will continue with the Steve Malzberg Show. And up next, Washington Bureau Chief of Al Arabiya News Channel. And that should be a very interesting conversation. And we'll bring it to you on the Steve Malzberg Show on Newsmax Television.